Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the appointed hour of 5:30. Thank you all for being here for our work session. The purpose tonight, as you well know, is for presentation by the city manager from staff on the process that'll be used as we discern, or as staff discerns and recommends a partner for the Spotswood property. Typically at our work sessions, we don't have public input or discussion or debate. If time allows, we may, if there are comments that folks would like to make, may invite you to join us. And by way of addition to the agenda, we do anticipate a brief closed session after this meeting, spontaneously, as evidenced by the look on your face. Anything else? Not for a work session, but yeah, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim to get us started with our work session on Spotswood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were not taking public comment necessarily for this meeting. We're here to look at the criteria that will be used to select a developer, but we did get one public comment, so I will take a minute and put that on the record for everyone. And this is from Jennifer Jarvis at 208 Taylor Street. She said, I listened to both presentations. I am more in favor with the Echelon Company. My reasons are they will be renting, they will have oversight and will do background checks. They will also have someone who is responsible or a point person for the property. What worries me about the Spotswood Collaborative proposal is they can sell some of the units. It says if, but it should be it has been known in the past that alumni have bought a house for their student, and when they are finished with school, it can be sold to another alumni. I live in the middle of the 200 block of Taylor, and when my boys were very young, it was common that loud partying would occur in the middle of the 100 block of Taylor Street to all hours of the night. Several times a month, that could be heard from my home. That home was purchased for a student, if my recollections are accurate. I also thought I understood in the city's comprehensive plan, you all were looking for more rental units in the city of Lexington, not house/condo apartment for sale. And again, it's from Jennifer Jarvis at 208 Taylor Street. I'm also going to read my briefing this evening because of those folks who might be online listening and just try to get it a little more clear than sometimes I may do, so bear with me, please. This is an overview of the criteria for consideration of a developer partner to develop the Spotswood site. Background. City staff and I want to be abundantly clear about the process and criteria that will be used to review the two development teams with an interest in the Spotswood site. I'm not a subject expert in all things of note and interest when it comes to evaluating developers. Therefore, I have asked key members of city staff for input on this review and evaluation. The criteria below are shared with City Council, the community, and the development teams tonight. I will add that I have had Tim Davey with the Timmons Group evaluate these criteria, and I anticipate that he will continue to provide review of these criteria until they are finalized in the days ahead. Of course, no review of the two interested parties has occurred as of yet. My intention is to get this initial list out to both interested parties now so they may become familiar with them and provide them an opportunity to comment or ask questions before they submit a response to these criteria. With over 3 weeks until the April 7th meeting, I am confident that responses to these questions or inquiries can occur and be evaluated for a recommendation to City Council at the April 7th meeting. Some people may be asking why we would request this information and why this is a different review than occurs during a site plan review or CUP. In the instance of a site plan or CUP, those projects are proposed by a private entity on a privately owned site. While the criteria below are certainly of interest in any context where a development may be occurring, in this instance, the city owns the site. The city has the opportunity to review any aspect of the development team and proposed development as we see fit. The city is responsible for choosing a development team and approving a development proposal for the Spotswood site. Thus, the City Council is singularly responsible for determining who our development partner is and who is awarded the opportunity to develop the site. Therefore, we can and will take a higher level of review and scrutiny than is customary during the site plan or CUP review and approval. These criteria may seem extensive and perhaps overly broad, Some aspects of these criteria may not apply to each of the development teams in the same fashion. Failure to respond or provide information does not necessarily mean that this failure will amount to a deficit when evaluating the proposals. However, additional information may provide useful and positive information for the evaluation of the development team in question. So I don't know if City Council wants to reflect on that, and if you have any comments or questions on just that aspect of our briefing here tonight.
Any questions or comments from council? Not your only chance for questions and comments, so I would say carry on.
I will do that. So going through the criteria, the first one is outcomes of similar projects undertaken by the development team. And underneath these criteria, I have some leading questions. How many similar projects has the team completed? Were these projects completed within a timely basis? What have local references said about the success of the projects? And I would note that as I send this out to the developers formally, I will ask for names, contact information in the communities where they have projects or that are have some knowledge of the particular project or development. And I'm going to break between each of these if there's questions, reflections.
I would say plow on, and council members, you're not known to be shy, so as you have questions, just pop in.
I'll pause on a short nature then. Experience of developer and development team in this market segment. What specific projects has the current development team collectively brought to completion? What similar product in the housing market has the current development team brought to completion? Now, if you note the difference, one says current development team, any project. The other one is projects in this market, this type of product, if you will. Who may be the subcontractors that could be used to complete your project? Preferred development type. How does your preferred solution / development on the site contribute more value to the city and benefits to the city than other competing multi-residential products? Project impacts on surrounding neighborhoods. Identify several projects that you have completed that may have had neighborhood concerns expressed at various points in the project. What nuisances, if any, have been reported, such as noise, lighting, stormwater runoff, etc.? Has there been any identified traffic congestion? What have tax values and occupancy rates been like in the surrounding neighborhoods after your development? Developer commitment to long-term outcome. How will the development team assure the community of the long-term viability of the finished development? How will maintenance on the entirety of the site be performed? Who will be the contact individual for concerns with the management of the site? Site management of completed development. How many completed sites does the development team / owner currently have under management? What will be the preferred or likely mechanism employed to manage the completed site? Financial strength of the development. What entities have provided capital for previous project development? Who may you work with to acquire capital for development of this site? Strength and completeness of the proposal of interest. That was the one proposal first submitted on October 31st, 2021. What were the strong and weak points in the original proposal submitted last October? Were there any gaps in required information? Was there additional helpful information included in this proposal? And of course, we have those proposals, so staff and I will be reviewing those. We will not ask the developers to provide additional information on that question at this time. Economics and city return on investment. What is the long-term return on investment calculated from the October 31st, 2021 proposal? What factors may impact the probability of your completed project to deliver the economic returns envisioned? Conformity with the City Council vision. City Council has been using the Danter study and other local housing needs indicators to pinpoint the desired development style of the site. How does your specific proposal complement City Council's vision? And there's a general other points to be considered. Are there other factors detailing the capability of the development team that are worthy of consideration? So that's what I have at this time. Later this week, I plan to get this out to the developers formally and then hope to have them respond by the 28th. And the staff and I will evaluate the proposals and report back to City Council on April 7th with a recommendation. At various points in this process, I likely will be utilizing the expertise of Mr. Tim Davey to provide comments and overview. So I've open to any questions or reflections on what's been offered. If you think there's a word or two that needs to be tweaked, we can probably do that as well in these questions and criteria.
To get us going, first off, thank you for embracing and utilizing Tim Davey and his firm. I think that they have a great deal of experience, so that's helpful. With each of these, do you anticipate a scoring 1 to 5 or something of that nature, or how do you?
Yes, there would be a scoring process,
Okay,
a point scoring process.
gotcha.
Are you also tasking staff with seeing how the proposals align with our comprehensive plan?
Not really, because we're really looking at the developer themselves. Some of these teams do, some of these questions do reflect on the development itself, like what is your vision and how does it complement City Council's vision, but really looking at the team. So I had not put in the comprehensive plan.
So the team and their body of work. And so one thing that just some of the proposals look at the developer then owning the property. And I guess I don't have experience how a transition might happen to owning a property, but then transitioning to, what's the proper term, but not market rate, but Lexington House apartments or Windermere subsidized housing. I don't want to misspeak, but if a developer-owned building transitioned to that property, do they have experience doing that? Is that something that they could do or would do?
Seems reasonable. I'll see if I can work something up on that.
Just because we've had properties locally that started out one way and they've transitioned and then they transitioned back and just again, so that the city, as we long-term partner with this developer potentially, we just understand what could happen 10 years, 15 years down the road.
I'll check with Mr. Davey and see what he can provide for guidance.
Ms. Sherman?
I guess I had a little bit of heartburn. I just feel like we asked a lot of these questions before at the last meeting. So is it easier for staff to compare it this way? I just feel like it's a bit repetitious or not moving forward.
Some is a bit redundant or repetitious, I agree, but I want to get these answers on the record, that they've gone out individually and provided this response to us, and then I would follow up with, again, the references or contacts that they have, which obviously we did not do from the last meeting or any previous meetings. So I want on the record what they want to tell us and include as we evaluate their proposal, I should say proposal, them as a team, and then check with references. So I wouldn't want to take something out of context from the last meeting and check on A, but not check on B, C, and D, and they find that to be more important. I want them to offer what they believe is important.
And I hope that staff will look at our zoning, our current zoning. I thought Arnie had done this early on, but the proposals have changed somewhat to see if there would be modifications or variances needed for either of these plans.
I'll take a look at that, of course. I'm not sure how relevant that is to selection of the development team itself, other than their understanding of the zoning, which I guess, frankly, would probably be in their initial proposal, what they believed at the time they would have to zone that property as, or change the property zoning to.
Other questions or observations?
I just want to make sure I understand. So these criteria, are they going to be weighted in any particular way, or are we just going to present them without any weighting? I mean, to me, some of these seem way more important than others. And if we get to a position where we feel that both of these developers could do this project and could do it really well, then the question becomes what fits with our vision of, what fits with the city council's vision, what fits with the comprehensive plan's vision, and I would hate to go through this and weigh these two developers and make it seem like we, what is the word I'm looking for? If we go through this process and we realize that they're both perfectly capable of doing this, then I don't want to, I think we can make this decision without making it on the basis of the merits of the developers, I guess is what I'm saying or thinking.
Dennis, I would respond to your question in that's the job that staff has before them. They've got to figure out, I feel very confident, and I think council does as well, that we have two very qualified, capable developers. And so the challenge is trying to figure out who we want to partner with in a non-emotional or method that, in a method that is spelled out and equitable, if you will, to both participants. And staff looking at the criteria, so, there was one point that a lot of conversation with the Spotswood property was all about ROI. The city's just money grubbers, and alls they want is just the biggest return on investment. Doesn't matter if it's attractive, doesn't matter if it suits for zoning, they're all about the money. And that was a narrative that we encountered, especially during the rah-rah discussion when January we said we think we want to sell it after telling them for about 5 years, we're going to sell that property. And then they turned and said, we want to keep our property. And we navigated and worked through that. So it's not all about the ROI. And as evidence, anybody who says the city only chose the group that was going to give the biggest return on investment, no, we're looking at the criteria, all of this criteria, as a recommendation from staff as to which direction we should go. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, council, do you want better or better? I don't know. They're both better. And that's where we got to move beyond and let staff earn their paychecks going through this and working with the Tim Davies, who looks at development opportunities throughout the state to come up with ideas on how do you go about somewhat blindly choosing the firm that you want to have your criteria, score it, and then bring forward a recommendation.
I was going to note what the mayor noted is that I would call Tim Davey if we're really in a tight spot and talk this over in some detail with him to get more of a clear view of what maybe are the most relevant criteria in this particular instance, that he would then say, okay, Jim, your A, B, and C is weighted for one party, D, E, and F for the next party. But if you look at A, B, and C, they're probably your most clear-cut, important criteria. For this, it's going to differ for sites in a community. It's going to differ for locations in the community, et cetera, based on the type of developer who's coming to do the project there, potentially. So,
and certainly with the two developers having starkly different concepts, if you will, one of fractured ownership, one of singular ownership, and that plays into part of that criteria, but not exclusively. So, fun stuff. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I think I just want to get some clarity with David's concern.
Sure. So a member of the public asked me, and they referenced the apartment complex out by Best Western and Hunt Ridge that was subsidized housing, I believe, and it is now no longer subsidized housing. It used to have income limits, and now it may not. And I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's what I was once they told me. And so they asked me if there was the ability, if the person decided to build it and then transition through a government program to essentially subsidized housing and still own it. The Robert E. Lee Hotel it switched. They just came forward to me and they said, We would just really like to know if that's what could potentially be built and then transition. And if the city enters into a relationship under one set of expectations, and if it were to change. And so I said I would ask.
I can try to help you with that. The three properties behind Best Western, one is market, two are affordable. The two that are affordable used to be Section 8. Now they are both tax credit. So they're still affordable housing, no change, just a difference in the funding flow. The market rate one, still market. Hunt Ridge opened as a tax credit, it's still tax credit. I don't readily see a market rate property going to affordable unless it needs extensive renovation, and the only way to go to get that renovation done is by way of tax credit. So that could become an affordable property. But if you want the best return for your investment, it should probably stay market, to be honest. It might occur often, but I'm not aware of it. Most of the time, you see where a rundown property closed or ready to be closed, and somebody comes in and says, we want to make that affordable, and they will go get the tax credits and work with the housing development to make that happen. But something that's brand new now and it's market in 10 years, it probably would still be market. It would take a lot for it to become to the point of needing a renovation and going tax credit. And I know with the property that I manage, we're mandated by a regulatory agreement that we must always stay affordable. No matter how much we struggle, we've got to stay affordable.
And just to pile on, when you look at the former Robert E. Lee Hotel, it was a beautiful, thriving hotel, closed. I don't know if it fell into bankruptcy or not, but a lot of times when property will fall into bankruptcy, the new owners may have a different vision for it. It was HUD housing or Section 8 housing for a period of time until Mr. Benacasa purchased it and revamped it. So can we control what happens there if it's built as apartments? No. If it goes bankrupt in 5 years and the new owner buys it and does it with tax credits or some other subsidy, we don't have any control. That we can't restrict, I don't think, that property by that measure.
And that, again, the premise of the question that I brought forward, if one of the developers has any experience in any of the properties that they've developed in the course of their career where they've made that transition. And it sounds like it probably, maybe not something that is typically done, but they just said, this person's got, a resume.
Right.
Have they done that previously?
Right.
I said, I'll ask.
Yep.
And something that could happen in a market rate is if a person applies for a tenant voucher, which means a housing voucher, they can go to rental assistance and be eligible to get a voucher. And they can go wherever they want to go for housing, a rental house or an apartment. And that voucher will allow them to pay rent just based on their income. But the rest of the rent balance is paid by the federal government. But they could go wherever they want to go with that voucher if that owner is willing to accept that voucher.
Relative to the selection process for the staff discerning which developer to partner with, any other criteria or questions that members of council have? Just all look very pensive. And again, I applaud the city manager for seeking out professionals that do this frequently so that can help us with the questions that we may not think to ask as we work through the process. Well, this is only a work session. We have more opportunities in regular meetings as well as to hear from the public as well in our work session. But anything else from you? Okay. This is the criteria staff will work with. If you do have something cross your mind or a concern or something of that nature, please contact myself and or the city manager. Don't know if members of the public have any questions or observations from our discussion here today, but would invite Max. Actually, come on up to the microphone, please. And as you're coming up, I'll say this is uncharacteristic and taking a point of personal privilege to ask for input because we don't normally have input at work sessions. But if you can press the button, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council. You really built up this question. It's not that important, I think, but nevertheless, I wanted to ask. First of all, I want to thank city staff for the job that they're doing. This has been a very interesting journey that we've been involved in, and I think the process has benefited greatly from the detailed approach that the city staff has taken on this project. So I want to thank you, first of all. I've been involved in the numerous RFPs, and this is by far top 5%. So thank you for that. Next question that I had with regards to the criteria that's been announced at this meeting, will there be an opportunity to add additional questions to the developers that may not be on the list that's been presented today?
I guess I would always entertain input. I would not guarantee that I would add any questions. Probably one of the things I would first do in that instance is run them by Tim Davey to determine how valuable they might be. I understand that each developer, each group of individuals might think there are other criteria that are more or less important, but it becomes perhaps the impression that it's a little slanted when they come from one group as opposed to another. I don't want to get into the he said, she said, I like this, I like that. So I'd be very cautious about it, but I will listen.
And I would suggest if there's information you feel that staff needs to evaluate that may not be on here, there's nothing that precludes you from supplying that with the return of the information for the record.
Thank you. Yeah, this would be a set of questions to both of the development groups, okay?
Right.
So it wouldn't be targeted to one developer versus the other. But to level the playing field of analysis, I think it's important to introduce some additional perspectives that may not be captured by city staff with help of other consultants. So,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you, Max. Anyone else that has any suggestions or observations? Hearing none, I will thank you all again very much for being here. And that concludes our work session. As I mentioned, we are going to have a brief closed session, and outside of that, don't anticipate any action to come out of our time together. So we will, again, thank you for being here, and we'll start taking down our tables. Have a great evening. Enjoy the lovely weather.